Earthworms. Earthworms are often called nature's plowman because they live in the ground and tunnel their way through the ground, mixing up the different layers of the soil. Well, what do earthworms eat? They are detritivores. Earthworms eat decayed leaves and plant material. They also swallow soil and little bits of animal material. How do earthworms move? Earthworms have two sets of muscles. First, circular muscles around each segment. Second, long muscles that run the length of the body. When the circular muscles tighten, the earthworm becomes longer and thinner. And when the lengthwise muscles tighten, the earthworm becomes shorter and fatter. How do earthworms help the soil? First, they mix up the different layers of the soil. Second, they add nutrients to the soil by depositing their waste products or castings into the soil. They help decompose dead plant and animal material into simpler parts that can be used again by other organisms. The scientific name for the earthworm is Lumbricus terrestris. The earthworm is an invertebrate which has a segmented body. It's called an annelid. The number of segments in a full-grown earthworm varies between 120 and 175. All segments, except the first, which contains the mouth, and the most posterior, which contains the anus, are similar. The external surfaces of segments 31 to 37 are glandular and swollen. This region is called the clitellum. This is located about 1/3 towards the front end of the worm. This clitellum means that the worm is an adult and can mate and lay eggs. Earthworms have regenerative powers and are capable of replacing damaged or destroyed segments depending on the region. Earthworms have to stay moist in order to breathe. They have no lungs, but take in oxygen from the air right through their damp skin into the blood vessels. Carbon dioxide moves out of the body the same way. Getting dried out is fatal for an earthworm. There are bristles on the underside of the worm called seta. There are 4 pairs on all but the first and last segments. The bristles are made of chitin, which is the same protein the hard outer covering of insects is composed of. These structures help the worm dig into the soil when it moves and help cling to the sides of the burrow when predators try to pull them out. Earthworms do have enemies, even though they spend much of their time underground. Their predators include birds, frogs, centipedes, moles, and man. A protective adaptation is the worm's brownish color. This makes the worm harder to see against the soil and gives it camouflage. When observing the movement of the earthworm, you'll notice that one part of the worm stretches out while another part squeezes together. This is because beneath the epidermis is a layer of circular muscle whose contraction decreases the diameter but increases the length of the body. Another muscle layer runs the length of the worm, the longitudinal muscle. The earthworm has 5 pairs of enlarged tubes which act as hearts. The tubes pump blood through the vessels of the earthworm's body. They are called aortic arches. As a worm eats enormous quantities of soil, it takes the decaying organic matter for its nourishment. From the pharynx, the food passes into the esophagus. There are several pairs of calciferous glands which secrete calcium carbonate into the esophagus. They function in the neutralization of acid soil as well as the elimination of excess carbonate from the blood. From the esophagus, the food moves to the crop. The crop serves as a temporary storage place. From here, it passes on to the gizzard. Grains of sand are present here, and the thick muscular walls work the food and the sand back and forth until the food is ground up. The food is then forced into the intestine, the longest section of the digestive system. The glands here secrete digestive chemicals that complete digestion, and the digested food passes through the walls of the intestine and into the bloodstream. The bloodstream circulates the digested food to other parts of the organism. Although the earthworm is sensitive to light and touch, it does not have sense organs. There are light-sensitive cells scattered throughout the skin. These cells enable the worm to distinguish between light and dark. The worm is also sensitive to vibrations, which is a useful adaptation since it's the mole's favorite food. Boy or girl? The earthworm is actually both. It is called a hermaphrodite because it has both ovaries and testes. The 2 pairs of testes are located in segments 10 and 11, counting from the anterior end, and the pair of ovaries in segment 13. Self-fertilization cannot take place. The exchange of sperm cells between 2 mating worms occurs during a process called copulation. Copulation usually occurs at night during moist weather and involves a temporary union of the 2 individuals along their ventral surfaces. A worm is old enough to lay eggs at about 1 year. After copulation, the worms separate, each having the other's sperm stored in the seminal receptacles until used for fertilization. When the eggs have reached maturity and have been released, the clitellum secretes a tube of mucus which slips over the front of the worm. The tube receives eggs as it passes from segment 14 and receives the other worm's sperm cells as it passes from segments 9 and 10. Fertilization occurs inside the tube as it slides forward until it finally slips off the anterior end. The tube, which is then sealed, is usually left in the burrow to form a cocoon containing several zygotes. After 3 to 4 weeks, pale, whitish wormlets crawl out as miniature adults. If the moisture and the temperature are not quite right, the eggs can stay in the case for a year or more. Because the earthworm's source of nutrition is organic matter in the soil, large quantities of soil are eaten. The undigestible soil passes through their intestinal tract and is eliminated as worm castings. This helps enrich the soil. Lower levels of earth are brought to the surface, which improves the chemical composition. In burrowing, they also improve farmland as air and water can enter the ground more easily. The naturalist Charles Darwin once calculated that an acre of farmland may contain as many as 50,000 earthworms. In the course of a year, those worms could overturn as much as 18 tons of soil per acre. This is of great significance to agriculture, and these creatures should be appreciated for their contributions to farming. One question that students often ask is, why do earthworms come to the surface when it rains? Well, according to popular science, generally, earthworms are loath to come to the surface as they rapidly lose moisture when exposed to UV rays. Your driveway in the summertime is probably a graveyard of crusty worms, a good example of the dangers of leaving their natural surroundings. When it rains heavily, though, the worms have little choice. Earthworms get their oxygen from the soil in which they live. When that environment becomes more water than air, they come to the surface to breathe, just like we do when we're swimming. And unfortunately, that exposes them to predators. They become a field day for robins. Earthworm dissection notes. Define the following terms. Dorsal means back. Ventral means belly. Anterior is the front or head end, and the posterior is the rear or the tail end. Now list organs for each of the following systems. The digestive system. Prostomium is the mouth. Pharynx, esophagus, crop, gizzard, the intestine, and the anus. Organs of reproduction. The clitellum, the male pores, testes, seminal vesicles and receptacles, the ovaries, and the female pores. Organs of the circulatory system include the aortic arches, the dorsal and ventral blood vessels. Organs of excretion include the nephridia and the anus. Of the nervous system, there are ganglia, bundles of nerve tissue, and a ventral nerve cord. In the respiratory system, an earthworm breathes through its skin. Earthworms have over 100 segments. The dorsal side of the earthworm is rounded, whereas the ventral side of the earthworm, or the belly side, is flat. The pores are used for mating and laying eggs. That is where the transfer of sperm takes place. The seta, or the little hairs or bristles, are for movement, maybe even protection. Where is the esophagus and what does it do? It is inside segments 5 to 15 between the pharynx and the crop, and its job is to moisten the food and neutralize the soil. The crop and the gizzard store food and then grind food. The gizzard has sand grains in it, which helps grind the earthworm's food. Digestion. How does fertilization take place in earthworms? Well, they are hermaphroditic. They're both sexes, male and female. They have sperm and eggs, testes and ovaries. They also have seminal vesicles which store sperm in segments 10 to 12, and the sperm leave at 15 into the mate at 9 or 10, and they're picked up by the seminal receptacles, and the ovaries are found at segment 14. What does the clitellum do? It becomes a protective cocoon for the eggs. The major blood vessels are the dorsal and ventral vessels and the 5 aortic arches located over the esophagus. Which way does blood flow in a worm? From dorsal to anterior, from the aortic arches down to the body. The nephridia are located 2 per segment, except 1 through 3 and the last ones, and their job is to filter the blood. Where is the brain located? Well, segment 3 on the pharynx, but no one has really ever seen one. How does the brain coordinate bodily activities? A ventral nerve relays messages between the systems and the brain, then into the nerve fibers found in each segment. Hey, Isaac. 3/4 of the class are on their way to Birmingham, so the rest of us are going to dissect earthworms today. All right, we've got a couple of YouTube videos that we're going to watch, and I have just a few boys with me today. We're going to do this, and then we're going to share. Well, it's just the formaldehyde or the preservative.
Is that like embalming fluid?
Look at mine. It's kind of like embalming fluid. All right, you put it
No, get out of here.
Male.
It's a meat cleaver.
It's called the seminal vesicles. See these white things? Those are the seminal vesicles. That's the male part. All right.
So disgusting. Make sure you get the male part.
Circulatory organs such as the heart.
Because earthworms are hermaphroditic. That means they're both male and female.
That's the male part.
Second period, we're going to dissect an earthworm on this day of December the 16th, 2014. All right, I'm going to put a pin through the earthworm's prostomium, which is its mouth. Angle it away.
That's mean.
This part of the earthworm is the anterior. This is the posterior. This is the dorsal side, which is the back side, and the underside is the ventral side. And you can feel little setae on there. Those are the little bristles that help it move through the soil. It has an entire digestive system all the way through. It's the simplest kind of animal with a coelom. Oh, and look, there's little pores. That's where the sperm and eggs enter and exit through these little bitty openings right there. And the other ones are there. We're going to cut through the dorsal side of this earthworm. It's mostly going to be skin and a little bit of muscles. Oh look, there's a layer of waxy coating on there. That's neat. I've never pulled that off before. Oh good, Jack's got in there. I'm having a tough time. I wonder if I need a sharper scalpel. Let me look.
Scalpel?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Now I'm going to use these pins to kind of open it up. Do you say him or her? I think we'll call it an it.
Sounds good to me.
Ooh, I see some male parts.
You gonna be sick over there? It wasn't me, it's Cade.
Alright, try to angle these out a little bit. There's some innards. There's the crop and the gizzard. The crop stores food and the gizzard grinds it. So the gizzard is real muscular and you can feel it. It's pretty tough. Okay, getting through the muscle here.
Never eat a worm.
No, we don't eat these. Not preserved like this anyway. I'd eat a worm if I had to.
Not even for $1 million.
Well, I would if I was starving. Okay, there's the major organs inside the anterior part of an earthworm. Oh, and I cut through the intestine. See that black stuff coming out is digesting food. That's going to be earthworm poop. And you know what earthworm poop is called?
It was going to be earthworm poop.
Earthworm poop are the little mounds of castings that you see in like the edge of a creek or in the mud. You can see them, or little piles. I've got pictures of it. I'll have to show y'all.
It's a male or not.
Well, they're both. They're male and female. You can see the seminal receptacles and the seminal vesicles. Okay, it's a hermaphrodite. That's what we call it, a hermaphrodite. Okay, that's the scientific word. And these little black organs right here are the aortic arches. Those are the aortic arches that are right there also. Okay, and then there's the crop and the gizzard, and then the long intestines. Our intestines are long too, just like theirs, because it increases surface area for absorption of food molecules. Okay, do y'all have any questions? There is a dorsal blood vessel. Let's see if we can find it. Yes, got the worm open.
He's getting down with it.
Oh, see, that's the food coming out.
Where did you get all these? Did you order these offline or something?
Yeah, Carolina Biological. See that line running down? That is the dorsal blood vessel. And it would be on the underside here. Okay.
So did he feast?
And these little, they're little squiggly things, I think you'd have to use a magnifying glass to see them, are called the nephridia.
Yeah, they stink.
And nephridia are part of the respiratory system.
Cade.
Cade's not liking this, huh?
No.
I've seen pig guts, but I haven't seen that.
All right, look at
Which is
that
worse?
waxy coating.
No, pig guts are actually better because they're bigger.
Well, pig guts look just like human guts, and that had us going one time. I have to show y'all pictures of that. Did I show y'all Brittany's guts? Oh,
No.
that'll be a good thing to show you. All right, any questions? That is our earthworm dissection for today.
And then, oh no, come back here.
Doing a good job. Find it. There it is.
What the?
I'm
What?
going like all
Hannah's.
dead skin while doing this.
And Trevor.
Wait, there's
Hey. And Bella. And Kyler. And Josue.
Okay, here, hold it still.
Miguel.
All right, there's Kyler's, and I see the crop and the gizzard.
So did you.
Okay,
Now can we
there's the
cut open
crop
the
and
head?
there's the gizzard.
Miss Cummings.
And if you keep going up that way, you're going to see the male seminal vesicles and receptacles up there. And
How do
if
you
you
get
go
those?
even further, you'll see the aortic arches.
I find a big old glove or something.
Big ol' what? What do I do now?
Sixth period, dissecting earthworms. Yes. Cayman is a perfectionist. It was my all-time favorite childhood story.
Warily from the shelter of the trees, and at the sight of the giant machines, they were horrified. Whoop, whoop, they cried, and in a wild-eyed panic, they went humpity-clumping off through the trees to go diving headlong into the nearest cave. Soon, the entire lump world was overrun.
We polluted.
The
Pollutions.
kept their mighty machines going full blast day and night without let up. In a
There we
frenzy
go.
to
See,
improve their
free up those
wonderful new world.
muscles.
Suddenly, great cities sprang up. Huge factory buildings with towering smokestacks, high-rise apartment buildings, and
This is not as neat as Bella's.
and above
Urgh.
it all, blue
Darn it.
100-story skyscrapers.
It makes it easier to turn it upside down.
Along with the buildings came a tangle of streets. and
Okay, but now we've
with
exposed
on-ramps and
the
off-ramps,
internal organs,
overpasses and underpasses,
but just not as neat as Bella's.
with trucks and buses and cars of all sizes.